Hey there everyone, this is Victor with VictorVectorJKU, and today Project Vector is going to get a little update in DOT compliance. Let's get into it. Alright, for anyone that has been following me on social media through Instagram or has been around the channel already here on YouTube, then you guys know that I live up in the Pacific Northwest up in Washington State. So in Washington State, there are two requirements to maintain a DOT compliant vehicle in terms of spray suppression. One has to do with if the tire or tread extends beyond the body, and the second is spray suppression if the body does not cover half height of the tire. So previously I had created my mud flaps. They're quick disconnect removable style, and I'll put a link in the video description below that will link you to the video that talks a little bit about how I have those guys set up. Now the second item is for the tread being extended beyond the width of the body. So a little while back when I installed my lift and I put on the new wheel and tire, I had to get a different back spacing, so that pushed my tire out about an additional 2 inches than where they were factory. Now this requirement's not held as stringent by officers, but for the mud flaps that one is a lot more typical to get a citation. In knowing that my tread was going to extend beyond the fender flare, I knew that I needed to look into something. So there was this product I was checking out probably back in the spring, and it's called Easy Flares. I had seen this product a little while ago back on Instagram, and it happened to be that they reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, what do you think about us sending over our product in exchange for some content? So do an install video like this and also throw some content up on my Instagram. So I was like, yeah, why not? Because it was actually a product that I was very interested in looking into. And now I have already installed these, and the video that you guys are going to be seeing is how I went about installing them, what the prep process is and everything else. And in another video, which I'll also link below, I went over how to replace the fender clips on the factory flares if you have damaged or broken any of those, and I get into all the details on that in that other video, so check out that video below. But yeah, so otherwise, if we look at my flares right now, the Easy Flare actually extends over and covers the full width of the tread. Now, without them, you can obviously see I'd have about 2 inches of tread there that would be extended beyond the flare. That'll cause a rooster tail. And like I said, officers aren't too critical about this up in Washington State. There's a lot of lifted trucks, Jeeps, and other vehicles that have their wheels or tires extended beyond their fender flares or the body of their vehicle. And you don't typically see this getting written up. Really, it is just focused on if your Jeep or vehicle is lifted, you need to have something that covers halfway down on that tread. Otherwise, you will likely get a ticket for that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and cut to the video that I had recorded a little while back when I actually did the install and show you guys how we go ahead and put this together. Alright guys, so this is the product. The brand is Easy Flares. It's a universal fender flare, and they have two different sizes. So they have the standard and the XL. I opted to go with the XL because it's a 2-inch wide extension, and their standard is about 1 inch. So I went with the XL version because I knew that my tires stuck about 2 inches further out from where the factory fender flare currently goes to. So I wanted to go with this one. So kind of the construction of it, it's a high density foam, so it's actually flexible. So you don't have to worry about if you rub up against a tree, it's not going to break. It's not brittle. It's very flexible. And what they do for installation is they have this 3M adhesive that will stick onto the existing body panel or fender flare that you have. And then what you can do is you can just cut it to length and cut it to the shape however you want it to be formed when you get to the terminating edge on the fender flare. So if you want it to come straight down and cut straight, or if you want to put a curve on it, whatever you want to do. So I'm pretty excited about this. So one roll should do about 2 fender flares for the JKU. So they sent me 2 of them to be able to do the full front and rear, both sides. Looks like it's a good product. It's made in America. Always something I'm looking for in any products that I am using on my Jeep. And yeah, I'm excited to see how this goes. Now, unfortunately, it is a little bit colder outside today than would be ideal. So their installation says that it's best to do when the temperatures are at least 72 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer. It's probably about 65 today, so I'm probably gonna have to do some prep work in the way of heating up the fender flares, heating up the tape or the adhesive on the easy flares, just to make sure that I get a good installation and that it will last a long time versus potentially falling off prematurely because the temperatures aren't ideal for this. So start off with, what I need to do is I need to clean up the fender flares, prep them up. So I'm gonna go ahead and wash the fender flares off, make sure they're good to go. Alright guys, so there's really no tools that are absolutely necessary to do this install. Really the only thing that you're gonna need is a pair of scissors, a rag, and some isopropyl alcohol. So with those, you can go ahead and get the easy flares installed. Now, if you're working in a colder climate, anything that's below 72 degrees Fahrenheit like they recommend for installation, then you do want to have a heat gun available. So you can use a hair dryer or something, but I do actually have a heat gun that I'm going to be using. 1, I'm going to be warming the material beforehand. 2, I'm going to be warming the tape just before I install it. And also the heat gun is going to help me dry off any of the moisture that's currently on here right now from washing the fender flare, just because it's not really humid, but there is a little bit of moisture in the air, and it's also still kind of cool. So this is going to help dry off the material, get it prepped, and make this installation a little bit quicker, a little bit better. Alright, so I got all the moisture off. Make sure that you get the moisture off the surface you intend on putting it on, and any surfaces that might come into contact with that tape, because you don't want that moisture to be able to seep around an edge. So like if I had water still on the underside, they could potentially seep around in the installation process. So you want to make sure it's all nice and dry. So next thing, before I go through and I clean this with the isopropyl alcohol, I'm going to go ahead and first unpack one of these, figure out the approximate length, leave a little bit of extra on there, and go ahead and figure out exactly how I want it laid out. So each of these rolls is just about 10 feet in length. This one measured about 10 feet, 2-3 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and get an idea of how long it needs to be here. Just do another quick verification. Alright, and again, I'm going to leave about 2 extra inches on this side. And with that, I'll still have more than 50% of the roll left on the other side. Alright, so you can see the one I just marked off, I still have about, I don't know, maybe 1.5 feet or so of length left. So we'll go and put that off to the side. Based on what I'm looking at right now, I think going on this underside here does look pretty good. I like the way that it'll flow, and it comes out at a pretty decent little angle out. It's not perpendicular, but it is a slight angle down. Whereas if I put it up on the top, it's going to be really angled up, and I really don't like the way that looks. So I think it's going to be going on this bottom edge here. So I'm going to go through and make sure that this is good and clean. I'm going to go ahead and hit that with the isopropyl alcohol. I'll come through and I'll make sure everything's good and dry, heat it up, and then I'll go ahead and get ready to start installing this guy. Alright guys, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to let the heat gun kind of keep the heat focus going towards the front edge. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get the easy flare prepped, and I'm going to start from the leading edge and work my way back, and I'm going to leave just a little bit overhanging on the front edge. That way I can have some adjustability for what my cut's going to be. So with having my heat gun right here, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to let that heat up the material and the tape, as it's also keeping the surface warm here. just because again it's below 72 degrees outside. It's probably about 65, and I just want to make sure that I have a good adherence of the adhesive. And now one other thing I'm doing here as I go is I am leaving the tape installed, so that way I don't contaminate the adhesive as I'm working my way around until I'm ready to reveal the adhesive at that point. And then I will focus some heat on the fender flare and the adhesive just as I'm working up that direction. And go back through as you're hitting this and make sure you get good pressure so that adhesive gets a good bond to the plastic trim or the edge that you're adhering it to. Alrighty guys, so that gets the rear easy flare installed. So now the only thing that's left to be done is go ahead and cut him how I want him. And I think what I'm going to start off with is I'm just going to cut him so he is in line with the existing fender flare first. And there you go, just as easy as that. I'll do the same thing up here as well. So personally, I think it turned out pretty good. It's nice that it's flexible. It's able to contour around the corners really well. It has a good adhesion, and it maintains flexibility, so if I ever brush up against a tree limb or something, it's not going to just get ripped off. And now, if you look, I am now pretty much covered to the outside edge of my tread. So that will make me compliant for spray suppression in Washington State. Alrighty guys, so I just finished up wiping down isopropyl alcohol on the fender flare. Now I just got to make sure that the material is nice and warmed up and ready for me to go ahead and start applying the easy flare. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the front and work my way back. And as I work around, I'm going to heat up the tape as I go. Alrighty guys, so that finishes off the install for the front. Now I just got to cut it straight again like I did on the back. Alright, so I definitely like the way the front turned out. It's a little less intense of corners that you have to overcome, so that makes it a little bit nicer there. But I definitely like the additional coverage of the tire. I think it turned out pretty good. I'm happy with it, and I think it gives it kind of a cool look. It's a little bit different. I'm sure it's not for everyone, but I definitely like the look of it. Alright guys, so that's pretty much going to wrap up for tonight. I'm going to go ahead and get the other side installed, get that wrapped up. Tomorrow we'll go ahead and do a little bit of a walk around. Alright, so we have the install all wrapped up, so let's go ahead and do a quick walk around and show you guys how the Jeep turned out. So this is how the easy flares turned out on my Jeep. I personally really like the look of it. I've been running these for about a month now, and honestly they've held up really well. I've washed it about 3 times using a pressure washer, and honestly they've held up really well. They are still very well attached. The adhesive's in good condition. Now in the back here, this is the only place, and this really came down to I didn't do a good enough job getting the adhesive attached there. That's really on that's my own fault. Otherwise, the adhesive is really well attached all the way through. It does a good job covering the tread, and it's very flexible. So if there's been any times that I've come up to a tree or rubbed up against it or had branches hit it, they have held up really well. There's no cutting or scoring anything, so they're doing a really good job. I'm very happy with the performance of them, and it's also keeping my Jeep a bit cleaner. Not a lot, but a little bit, and so that's great. Then one thing I also want to note is that the color matches really well to the factory fender flares. It's pretty much the exact same color, if I'm honest. The only thing that's different is, you do have a little bit of a texture to the fender flare where this is more smooth, but that's perfectly fine. Honestly, the color being as close as it is really makes it look clean and good, and so far I've just really enjoyed them. This is going to be a great temporary solution with these winter months here and keep me with DOT compliance. So I say temporary solution because in the future I will upgrade my fender flares, but right now I just don't really know what that path is that I want to go yet. So this gets me where I need to go, and I gotta say, I think it's about $50, maybe a little bit less, per 10-foot roll, which is good enough to do 2 fender flares on the Jeep JK. That's pretty solid. So less, about $100, and you're gonna be covered, and you're not gonna be dealing with a fine. Up in Washington State, at least. I don't know about your state, if you guys have similar spray suppression laws or not. But about $100 and you're covered. You don't have to worry about a fine, dealing with all of that. So personally for me, the less that I have to worry about if I get pulled over with an officer saying, oh, well, your vehicle doesn't meet this requirement, that requirement, the next requirement, or just adds more attention to me while I'm driving down the road to potentially be hassled by an officer, I'm going to do what I can to avoid those things. But that's just me personally, so, totally up to you guys. If you think it's a good idea for you, go ahead and try them out. But yeah, so if you enjoyed this video today, please give it a thumbs up, give it a like. If you're enjoying the content that I'm putting together, please subscribe to the channel. And, if you got anybody that is interested in something like this, go ahead and share it to them. Otherwise, we are VictorVectorJKU, and we are taking on this build and the trails, both direction and magnitude. All right, everyone, have a good one. Catch you next time.